I'm sitting alongside of the Lake Whatcom model, which is located in the display area of the Science Building at Western Washington State College. Now, actually, I'm just sitting off of Reveille Island, which is in this locality. Perhaps we could point out some of the other features along this lake. Here is Corning's property. This is the bay which enters the Corning property area. On down the way here, we can see Strawberry Point, the Lake Whatcom Resort right here. Across the lake, about 1.5 miles away, if this were really to scale, is Agate Bay. DeLesta Park is located in this locality. Here's the area from which Bellingham derives its water supply. The community of Geneva is situated here. The Old Larson Mill and Bloedel Donovan Park located right here, with Silver Beach on the other side. Now, this model, you will note that the shoreline has not been built up at all. It's flat along the shore. This is because we were only interested in showing the topography of the lake itself. We hope later, however, to build up the shoreline so that we can actually show the way the lake looks in reality. Now, in building this lake, we had to do it according to scale, so we followed a horizontal scale of 1 to 2,400 feet. That is to say, if we have 1 foot here, this would be the equivalent of 2,400 feet on the lake proper. Now, the vertical scale is different. On the vertical scale, we followed a 1 to 360 relationship, which is to say that 1 foot vertically is equal to 360 feet in the lake proper. Now, you can see that these two scales are different. Well, the reason for this is because if we were to have followed the same scale vertically and horizontally, we would have wound up with a lake 26 feet long, but so very shallow that we couldn't actually have shown the topography of the lake at all. Now, let's look at some of the things we know about this lake now from having built the model. First of all, we have discovered that there is a section of the lake right in here. There's a sill, a very shallow land mass crossing the lake in the area of Geneva, about 10 feet deep, which separates this section of the lake from the remainder of Lake Whatcom. Now, this depression we sometimes call Impoundment 1. We can see that Bloedel Donovan Park is located on this impoundment right here. And here's the Old Larson Sawmill. This impoundment is about 100 feet deep at its deepest. In this locality here, 100 feet deep. Because of this shallow sill exists, we find that this section of the lake is pretty well isolated from the remainder of Lake Whatcom. Now, next to this, we have Impoundment or Depression 2, which lies between the sill at Geneva and another which runs across at Strawberry Point right in here. This section of the lake, then, we call Impoundment 2 between the Geneva sill and Strawberry Point. At its deepest, this section of the lake, right in here, is approximately 60 feet. Now, in terms of Bellingham, this is probably the most important section of Lake Whatcom because the water supply that we derive comes from this section of the lake. Right about here, the city of Bellingham draws off its water supply. Now, in spite of the fact that Impoundment 2 is isolated, it does not appear to be as isolated as was Impoundment 1. That is, we find that there is a considerable mixing of water across the sill, keeping this water rather pure. Now, it's interesting that many people in Bellingham think that there's nothing beyond this section of the lake. They feel that all of Lake Whatcom is located in Impoundment 1 and 2. In reality, we have found that only 5% of the total lake volume is contained in these two sections of the lake. 95% of the lake lies below, or rather above, Strawberry Point. And only 5% here. 3% of the lake is contained in Impoundment 1, 2% is contained in Impoundment 2. Now then, if we move on over the Strawberry Point Sill area, we move into the deeper portion of Lake Whatcom, where the great mass of water is actually contained. Many people don't realize what a large lake this is. It is a very large lake, and it's very deep in places. This particular portion in here we call sometimes impoundment or depression 3. At its deepest, this particular portion perhaps is 250 feet. Right in here, it's about 250 feet deep. Now you will note that this section has very precipitous edges. It drops off very sharply at the edges, but the bottom of it is fairly flat. It's kind of like a great big bathtub, probably scoured out by a glacier in some way. Some people think it might be desirable if we could draw our water supply from this portion of the lake because it's very deep. The water at the bottom is very cold, and it seems to be quite pure. It seems that it might make a very good water supply.